Alright, folks, take a deep breath because the live-action Snow White trailer has arrived. And oh boy, it brought everything: controversies, changes, and that sprinkle of love it or hate it that only Disney knows how to deliver. So, grab your coffee and let's dive into this shiny bombshell. Let's start with the point that sparked the most discussion: the explanation behind the name Snow White. In the trailer, Disney makes a bold move and reinterprets the origin of this iconic title. Now, the protagonist was named Snow White because she was born on a snowy day, and her purity is compared to the whiteness of the falling flakes. Sounds beautiful, right? A poetic approach, trying to modernize a classic element of the tale. But here's the question: does it work? In the original story, the character's skin color wasn't just an aesthetic detail, it was a central part of the narrative. This change creates a feeling of detachment from the original material, as if Disney is trying to fit the story into a new cultural context. And it's not wrong to want modernization, on the contrary. But if the idea was to break expectations, why not go for something truly revolutionary, like casting an albino actress? It would have been a bold choice that honored the literal description of the original tale while bringing representation to a group rarely seen in prominent roles. Ultimately, the new meaning behind the name tries to appeal but doesn't completely erase the discomfort felt by many fans. It's an attempt to reconnect the audience with the story in a more symbolic way, but for some, it may have come across as a forced effort to justify a change that didn't need explaining. Now let's talk about Rachel Zegler, our new Snow White and the center of several discussions. First, it's undeniable that Rachel is talented. Anyone who has seen The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes knows she exudes charisma and has a voice that could probably convince a magic mirror to change its mind. But despite her talent, some of her statements stirred up a storm online. Rachel mentioned in interviews that she wasn't a fan of the original animation and criticized the idea of a princess who waits to be rescued. So far, so good? We live in a time when stories are being revisited to align with modern values. The problem was the tone. For many fans, the way she spoke sounded dismissive of the classic that inspired the live action. And that's where things get tricky. Modernizing is important, sure, but disrespecting the past, especially a work that has touched so many generations, never goes down well. Her remarks further divided opinions. On one side, some support the vision of a more independent Snow White. On the other, critics argue she seems to kick away the ladders that helped her get where she is. In the end, the issue may not be the desire to change but the way it was communicated. Modernizing a princess's role doesn't mean erasing what came before, and it's in that delicate balance where Rachel stumbled. Now it's up to the movie to prove these changes are worth it, and maybe help Rachel win back the sympathy of part of the audience. And then we get to the part that, for many, was the biggest what of this trailer. Where are the 7 dwarfs? Disney, clearly trying to avoid controversies, opted to replace the iconic characters with magical creatures. In the trailer, we see beings resembling gnomes or forest spirits, with that typical medieval fantasy look. Visually, they are quite impressive, featuring well-done CGI and details that seem to aim at giving each one personality. But the question remains, was this necessary? The 7 dwarfs weren't just secondary characters in the original tale. They were workers, had a strong emotional connection to the story, and symbolized real people helping Snow White on her journey. Replacing them with magical creatures might seem like a creative decision, but in practice, it feels like an attempt to sidestep criticism instead of facing it head-on. After all, reimagining the dwarfs with a modern and sensitive approach would have been much more impactful. Imagine actors with dwarfism portraying complex, multifaceted characters without falling into outdated stereotypes. It would have been a unique opportunity for true inclusion. By turning them into magical creatures, Disney ends up sending the wrong message. It's as if they're saying the solution to avoiding stereotypes is to erase the existence of a group altogether. And that stings. Because Snow White has always been a story about real people, humans with flaws and qualities, facing challenges together. When you replace that with magical beings, you lose some of the narrative's soul. Moreover, it's a missed opportunity to bring meaningful representation to the screen. It's as if, in trying to avoid one problem, Disney created an even bigger one. Now, let's talk about who stole the show in the trailer: Gal Gadot as the evil queen. Seriously, if there's one thing that seems tailor-made for this live action, it's this casting choice. Gal simply embodies the villain with the perfect mix of elegance and menace. Every frame of her in the trailer is mesmerizing, from the icy gaze to the impeccable posture. Disney bet big, and in this aspect, they nailed it. Ironically, this decision also brought an extra challenge to the film: the inevitable comparisons between her and Rachel Zegler. After all, we're talking about an actress widely considered one of the most beautiful women in the world playing a villain obsessed with beauty. This created a tension that goes beyond the narrative. No matter how talented Rachel is, and she is, the comparisons in appearance were amplified by this choice. And that's not the fault of either actress, but rather how the production decided to shape their characters. The trailer hints that the evil queen will have a deeper arc than just envy over beauty. It seems power will also be one of her main goals, which could add even more interesting layers to the character. Gal Gadot has the charisma to explore this more ambitious and multifaceted side of the queen, making her more than just a superficial villain. If Disney manages to work this duality well, we might have one of the best live-action villains so far. And honestly, who wouldn't want to see Gal Gadot facing off with a magic mirror and plotting Machiavellian strategies with that glamorous touch? Other aspects of the movie might lack perfection, but when it comes to the evil queen, Disney seems to be delivering everything. The prince, or rather, the thief. Yes, my friends, it seems Disney decided to take a creative turn and turn Snow White's love interest into a character with more layers. He's no longer the classic charming prince who shows up at the end to save the day. Now, he has a mysterious past, a rebellious side, and a vibe that screams Flynn Rider from Tangled. And you know what? This has potential. Turning the prince into a thief isn't exactly a groundbreaking idea, but it's a choice that could work very well. After all, a character with flaws and his own arc tends to be more interesting than the perfect prince who barely speaks in the original story. The question is, how will Disney develop this new angle? If he's just another charming thief who discovers true love and redeems himself, it risks falling into cliché. But if they give him a solid motivation and a rich emotional journey, he could stand out as one of the film's highlights. Another intriguing aspect is the contrast he brings to the story. While Snow White seems to be dealing with more internal and emotional dilemmas, the thief, with his now more active role, could bring an interesting dynamic, blending action, humor, and perhaps even a touch of drama. This adds a new layer to the film that sets it apart from the classic animation. However, let's be real, it's crucial that this change makes sense within the story's context. It's no use giving the character a full redemption arc only to pull a plot twist like, oh, actually, he was a prince in disguise all along. That would be the most anticlimactic move. So, Disney, here's a plea. Be original. If you're going to modernize, do it with courage and authenticity. Because, honestly, the thief has the potential to steal more than just wallets. He could steal the show. Now we come to one of the most striking elements of the trailer, the visuals. From the very first frame, it's clear that this live-action adaptation of Snow White aims to distance itself from the light-hearted, colorful tone of the classic animation. The color palette is darker, the settings have a dense fantasy vibe, and even the way lighting is used seems to carry emotional weight. It's a world that feels much more real, yet still magical. And this, undoubtedly, is one of the film's strongest points so far. The atmosphere presented in the trailer suggests the movie aims to dive into a more mature narrative, almost as if it's trying to attract a different audience to the story. It's not just about a princess fleeing from a villain, it's about complex characters facing internal and external dilemmas in a world full of mystery. There's something epic about how everything is portrayed, as if we're meant to explore every corner of that universe to uncover its secrets. And the visual care doesn't stop at the settings. The costumes also stand out, blending classic elements with a modern touch. The Evil Queen's attire, for example, is a showstopper, luxurious, threatening, and full of personality. Meanwhile, Snow White's look is simpler, seemingly reinforcing the idea that her beauty and strength come from within. But here lies a problem. Could this simplicity have been overdone? In the trailer, Snow White's outfit and even her hair fail to make the impact expected of such an iconic protagonist. This might be a deliberate choice to highlight the contrast with the Evil Queen, but it still leaves a feeling that they could have invested a bit more. On the other hand, the darker tone is a calculated risk. It might attract an audience looking for something different, but it also runs the risk of alienating those who expected a vibe closer to the original animation. It's a delicate balance, If the heavier tone works, it could be a significant differentiator for the film. If not, it might come across as a forced attempt to make a fairy tale more serious. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment below with your thoughts on the trailer, and don't forget to check out the next video on the screen. See you next time.